We'll be starting shortly. We'll be starting shortly.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming along to this joint lecture tonight. It's lovely to see so many people actually in the auditorium. It's not usually this full, so it's quite a surprise to us. Well, no, it isn't really. I knew it was a good subject, so it wasn't going to be a problem. Anyway, welcome, everyone. Can I just say a few words? Be wary of where the fire exits are, and take note of the signs and such like outside of which way to go in the event of anything terrible happening. The other point is, can you please switch your phones off? There is this long-standing tradition in NEMI that anyone whose phone buzzes while you're in a lecture, it's a £50 fine. There's only one person actually it happened to, and that person did not pay his £50 fine, did he, David? But anyway, we will try to hold to that. Otherwise, welcome again, and here we are. Apologies for absence. I only have one, and that's Bill Bell. Does anyone else have any names? Brian Pickering, lovely. That goes without saying. But anyway, there we are. Lovely. So the minutes of the last meeting are approved and signed. I'm sure everyone who's here was quite happy to look at Ian Kerr's presentation of rising to the challenge of zero carbon in aviation. which was about fuels, basically. So very, very interesting. Yeah. There we are. Very, very interesting again, and it looks like we had just a moment. Oh, wonderful. Anyway, yes, apologies, because our president won't be with us tonight. He has been called away on some other event. So again, I did tell a lot of you that I wouldn't be standing here tonight, and there was lots of sighs of relief, but unfortunately things have changed, so it's cries of horror now. But nonetheless, anyway, the last meeting was, as you say, the rising challenge of zero carbon in aviation, and it was. Can I have an approval and a seconder for that, please, Dave Granger? Thank you. DG, and seconding. Oh, right. Thank you very much indeed. Right. So there we are. We can get things started again. As you say, that was our last lecture. And this is actually the next one that's coming up in the 12th of June. Again, another very, very interesting subject. And honestly, you know, you should all be members of NEMI because, you know, we get some absolutely wonderful lectures in here every month and sometimes a little bit more frequently. So do your best to come along to them. Anyway, there we are. This is what NEMI is all about anyway. As you can see, it's got quite a few addresses, and we have quite a few events. Is it going to change? Yes, we have lectures and conferences. We also have an annual dinner, which I think is going to be September this year. Another wonderful event. It's always good. And, excuse me, if things go well, I believe we'll probably be having it here. But that certainly would be my intention. And we have field trips. That's also something else that we do occasionally, but not quite so frequently at the moment. But everything's on the NEMI website as it comes up. So if you keep an eye on the website, get some good ideas of when you'd like to come along and what you'd like to see. Right, here's the benefits of membership. Post-nominals, of course, member of the NEMI and fellow of the NEMI. Invitation to guest lectures and events. Discounts on institute and field trips, publications and events. Invitation, again, as I said, to the annual dinner and sporting events. And opportunities, now this is the big one, opportunity to serve on our committees to shape the future of the Institute and of Science, Technology and Engineering in the north of England, which I think you all agree with me is very, very important. So please consider it and come along and fill in one of the membership forms. We are very, very closely allied to IOM3 as well. So if you are a member of IOM3, you are entitled to a membership of NEMI also. But it does go the other way. If you are only a member of NEMI, we would very much appreciate it if you consider becoming a member of IOM3 too. On that point, I think I'll pass you across here to Gary, who's going to explain to you all about the upcoming lecture. Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you. Still live. I was told to make sure the microphone was working before I spoke. First of all, our thanks to Mimi to invite us again in to do a joint lecture. This is the second joint lecture of this program. First one by my colleague from Parsons Steam Turbines. So something similar tonight, but slightly different era, shall we say. So we're delighted, and we'll be looking forward to any joint lectures we can arrange with you for next year. Tonight, we're fortunate that we've got we've been able to invite one of the premier classification societies of the world in to give you a talk on nuclear, and as you can see here. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about Matt. Matt is a director of Lloyd's Register Global Nuclear and Naval Submarines segment. Oh, that's a mouthful, isn't it? He leads Lloyd's assurance activities for floating nuclear in the marine and offshore sectors. Matt joined Lloyd's Register in 2012 after his previous role in the Royal Navy as a marine engineering officer on the Trafalgar-class submarines. Was that? So he previously worked developing goal-based standards, rules and assurance products, and played a key role in the development of Lloyd's Unmanned Marine Systems Code. Wow. So one of the areas he's talking tonight, as you can see, is the rise and continual rise of nuclear in the commercial sector. So, Matt.
So first of all, can everyone hear me okay? Wonderful. And as we say on Teams calls, can everyone see my screen? Wonderful. So I just want to say thank you very much for the invite here tonight. I've attended many of these kind of lectures through the IMechE and IMRest, so it's actually a privilege to be actually giving one of these lectures, so it's kind of coming full circle that way. So also, thank you for streaming this live on YouTube. My kids think I'm cool now and a YouTuber, so as I say on YouTube, please like and subscribe to this fantastic institution afterwards as well. And Lloyd's doesn't have any merch, we won't push on you that way, so thank you. This kind of presentation, we're going to go and talk about the rise of civil nuclear and its applications in the maritime space and why this is significant in here as well. Looking around the audience, and apologies to people online, you all look like a very knowledgeable bunch. So I'm conscious I don't want to give you death by PowerPoint. So is there any things that you want me to kind of cover in my talk, or anything you want burning questions that I make sure when we go through I dwell on that a bit longer rather than wait until the end? Happy for you to shout out if that's okay. I will keep talking, so we'll go from there. So what I want to say is, why has nuclear come back to the fore? Because, you know, when we think of nuclear, we think of Chernobyl, we think of Fukushima, superheroes, radioactive waste leaking everywhere. Why has it come back now? And what are the potential kind of applications we can use it for now? And what are the challenges we have of trying to make it safe is the wrong word, the public perception that it's safe to operate in there as well. And then I want to give you a flavour of some real projects that we are involved in now. And then I will close with a summary, and then I'll take questions from yourself. And I do have some cool pictures as well. It's not all words on the screen. So, why nuclear now? So, we all know about global warming, climate change, and shipping produces, it's nearly 10% of the world's emissions come from shipping. The IMO has put a decree out there to halve carbon emissions by 2050. As we know with these kind of statements, how do we actually achieve that, and what do we do, and what does it look like? There are various kind of alternate fuels out there, so we talk about biodiesel, LNG, ethanol, methanol, but every alternate fuel has its pros and cons. In particular, power density, where do you get it from, its volatility in there as well. So nuclear, in this space, with the kind of technology changes, has been seen as a reliable alternative fuel due to its high power density, its ability to stay in the box, and its ability for zero emissions while operating. Yes, there are some challenges with nuclear, and we'll kind of discuss that in its process, but it's definitely up there in the mix, and people are seriously looking at nuclear as well. So we will kind of understand that bit in there as well. And also the potential as nuclear as a disruptor in there as well. So we talk about shipping and alternate fuels. Bunkering is a big consideration for ship owners. Fuel costs money. It's the biggest consideration with ships. We talk about slow steaming. With nuclear, we have potential for ships to go faster. So there's a kind of competitive advantage in there as well. Ports, if you're a port that can take a nuclear ship, you can jump up on the port index and take in some of those kind of trade routes. So there is a commercial advantage in there as well. and also how we kind of lease charter ships, owner-operator model. That's all very different as well. If you're not paying for fuel, but you're leasing a ship, there are some advantages in there. So there's a different economic and political landscape for nuclear ships. So I'm not going to dwell on the next slide too much, because I'm pretty sure everyone in this room kind of recognises most of those vessels in there as well. But these are the kind of examples we've got of current examples of floating nuclear. Say current, the Savannah's probably not current anymore, but it shows how it can be used. And when we talk about the Savannah, we very much kind of talk about, that was the first test case, that was the nuclear age with Eisenhower, Atoms for Peace program kind of going in there. And then one of the reasons why it failed was the commercial viability of it. Nuclear was not commercially viable. It was a small ship. You had to have agreements between countries to allow that ship in there as well. So it just wasn't efficient. So the world has changed now, where nuclear is looking more economically viable. You notice with my language, I'm being careful how I term things, because I don't want to be said, Lloyd's Register said it is viable now, but I'm talking about the technical challenges of assuring that, and that's what my lecture will kind of focus on as well. Also, my favourite being a submariner, I was a nuclear watchkeeper on Trafalgar boats. I thought an astute boat looks a bit shinier than a Trafalgar boat, but again, that's the ability to drive around a small reactor underwater. So when we talk about small reactors, we're looking at the 4th generation. So again, into this technology as well. We're having small reactors that you can see in there as well. So, and then we have icebreakers. We have Russian icebreakers as well. So there is a commercial surface application for Russian icebreakers and Russian power barges as well. So 2 of the applications where we can see it already working in the world. I would state that all these examples are pressurized water reactors with a high level of enrichment for obvious reasons. And the technology we're talking about for the rise of civil in the maritime space is low enriched fuel, which is the key difference. You cannot make bombs from this fuel. So this is a key kind of point in there as well. So this is kind of one of the reasons as well. We talk about the Russian examples, but it's very state controlled, and I'll stop there before I get in trouble. But again, we've got the Nimitz class carriers as well, and ports accepting. So ports do accept these, military ships, military ports. I don't know if anyone's been down to kind of Stokes Bay in kind of Gosport Way when an American class Nimitz character is kind of berthed up in there as well. It is spectacular to see one of those big kind of nuclear ships in there as well. So it's where these ships can go and where these ships can trade, again, which was one of the downfalls in Savannah. Mark Tippin, who was meant to be giving this lecture but unfortunately couldn't make it, he was in Baltimore last week going around the Savannah, so I'm very, very jealous. So he owes me a big, big favour. And then, obviously, there's some other examples on there, such as the Otto Hahn, which started as nuclear and then he kind of converted to diesel. But we find when we talk about nuclear, we always see the Savannah, and this audience is probably fully aware of the Savannah as well, so we won't kind of dwell on that, and we'll talk about potential applications of where we can use nuclear and where it can become viable using with other fuels as well. So hopefully the pictures come out okay. So one of the things that is very attractive to nuclear is power barges. And the reason for that is that you can have it in one nation's water, so you have one nuclear regulator, one flag. So it's very simple, and afterwards, when you've finished it or you no longer want to buy the kilowatt hours, you take it away and it can move somewhere else or disposed of. Or that power can be put against, hopefully this works on the thing. Does that work okay? On one of these, a kind of floating fuels production plant. So you can make other alternative fuels. So you can make green fuels as well, as rather than burning carbon to make these fuels. So there's a different advantages of that way, that you can use nuclear to produce green hydrogen. So, and that can be pumped to shore as well. So we have the products of electricity and heat, and we can use them that way. And then we've got the very stylish concept picture of a ship. this is what I was talking about earlier when we're talking about a kind of ship charging around the world at like 30 plus knots, delivering that as well. I would quite confidently say that we won't see this in the next few years, possibly the decade, because it's political agreements between ports, and we're going to have a nuclear-powered ship. The IMO and the IEA, so the International Maritime Organization and the International Atomic Energy Association. Apologies, I won't talk in acronyms, and that's probably the last time I'll spell that out clearly, because I will stumble over my words. So if we can edit that out and make it look slick, that would be great, thank you. So these two organizations are not ready for propulsion that way, because if we look in the current regs of SOLAS Chapter 8 and the underpinning document, the Nuclear Code A491, it talks about nuclear propulsion to direct drive, which is connecting the reactor to the propeller, which we see in modern ships we don't do anymore through electric propulsion motors, so it's not applicable. So that has to be worked out by governments of how that would work. So what we would see is power barges where they'd be floating and not propelled as a kind of fuels production, power generation, power stations, and there is potential applications for that as well. And I will show you a real example at the end of this presentation where we're actually looking into one of these studies in there as well. And then one of the things that caught me out as well is, did anyone think that we'd ever see a nuclear-powered yacht, like a mega yacht? I didn't. I thought that was slightly weird, to be honest, but apparently there are considerations out there for nuclear-powered yachts. It's potentially as a kind of demonstrator to say, look, we can do it, but that's kind of where we are, and that was one as well. And also potentially nuclear-powered cruise ships, because you may kind of see on the news about cruise ships going into Venice or trying to be banned from Venice, small kind of Caribbean islands, the kind of pollution they put in there, the kind of power generation needs they have, that if you had a nuclear-powered cruise ship, you wouldn't rely on the port to provide you power. You could, I'm not sure if greenify is a word, but I will use it anyway. You could greenify the port by providing clean power to the port, not taking power from the port. So there's another advantage as well. I once went to a lecture a couple of years ago by one of the ports, and they said the issue of alternative fuels is we don't know which fuel people want. We can't have the whole range of fuels like you see in a petrol station, and who's going to pay for my distribution network of these fuels? So you can see the challenges, and you can see this is why ports are interested in there as well. But on these potential applications, the biggest question we've got at the moment is probably the biggest blocker, I would say, is public perception. Does the public understand or like nuclear, or do they think of kind of superheroes, Chernobyl or Fukushima? And we've got to get over that. I must admit, I bored my wife to tears when we watched Chernobyl trying to explain it to her, but she really enjoyed the program. So you can see where it kind of fits into that space. So this is why power barges, again, are a potential kind of application, out of sight, out of mind. People are not seeing them charge around. They're kind of in one place, and we can slowly build it up there as well. Another thing in this generation as well, that we are all addicted to our phones. My phone is off, by the way, to obey the rules. But we've kind of got data centers and the cloud. The cloud is in a data center. Data centers need huge amounts of power. Where do they get that from? It is very expensive. We've seen on the news that Microsoft has bought a stake in 3 Mile Island to restart one of its reactors. Amazon is looking at nuclear power as well to kind of provide green electricity to its operations. So data centers, if you could have a power barge, plug it into your data center and power it that way, you're kind of decarbonizing yourself. So these are kind of applications, and this is probably one of the use cases. If you told people that actually nuclear power keeps your cloud going for your photos and your music and streaming, this may be a potential way of solving that public perception question in there as well. But it is a very kind of crawl, walk, run process. Again, we're not going to see thousands of ships charging around. The IMO produced a report, and it said potentially by 2050, you could have 10,000 ships that could have a nuclear reactor. Keyword in that is could. So we will see how it goes and what countries say yes to it as well. So there's a bit of a kind of political thing in there. Which countries will say yes, which ones won't, and the kind of advantage of that as well. As we talk about perception in there as well, we've got this graph here of where these reactors will sit in there as well. I live in Bristol, and on my doorstep I've got Hinkley Point C, and when I drive there it does look a bit like Mordor. It is huge. It has got cranes coming out the ground, and when I go to Western-super-Mare at night, for running by the way, nothing else, you can see lights coming out from Hinkley Point. It is a huge site. It's going to produce 9% of the UK's electrical power needs when it comes online. But I suspect when it comes online, it might be 8%, just because the delays in that mega program. So these reactors are small, and the key bit is small and the ability to be produced a lot quicker than Hinkley Point, which can't be a bad thing. But it's where they sit in that scale, and the smaller they are, what kind of regulatory constraints do we need that on there as well? Do we have to go for the kind of whole Hinkley Point site planning process, or can we use it, say, like a gas turbine, as Lloyds do for marine type approval, saying for this application, you can build it like this with its certificate, that's its use case. If we take it out that use case, then we have to reapply the license process. So there's a sweet spot of where we're working to at the moment, and regulators are trying to understand how it works in there as well. So it depends how much this group is kind of familiar with classification societies and the role classification societies play. We don't write our own rules. We propose rules, but our rules are created by what industry wants that sit on our technical committee. So they tell us where they're going, what their issues are, and what the technology challenges are, and we write our rules to suit. Effectively, Lloyd's rules from 1760 to now are a series of accidents kind of written to understand what happened and to improve so that accident never happens again. So we kind of look at those kind of tragedies, such as the kind of Costa Concordia, and then updates come in that way, such as you must have lifeboats for the whole ship's the whole crew on both sides of the ship. So it's that gradual process of that way of learning from mistakes. But in this, we have to be forward thinking and understand what the hazards are so they don't happen. Because I don't think we can learn from our mistakes in nuclear. So this is why we've kind of looked where we are in that kind of sweet spot of safety levels in that one. So I'm going to talk about some of these Generation 4 reactor technologies out there as well. So you can see we've got the pictures on the screen on there as well. We've got a variety of kind of molten salts. We've got heat pipe, pressurized water reactors on there, all for different commercial companies as well. So getting the private sector as part of this is one of the key drivers for change, allowing innovation to happen. We've still got training and people. I'm very on that as well. I'm a submariner. I've left the Navy. So the Navy have trained me. I've done my time in the Navy. I'm now working for Lloyd's. Where's that conveyor belt of people we need to kind of operate this as well? And also, where are we going to get the fuel from? So there's still challenges on that as well. And then end of life, what do we do with reactors as well? So we are aware to the challenges of what you've got to do, but when we're driving forward is how can these kind of benefit us in shipping and helping with climate change in there as well. So I'll kind of talk about this lightly, each reactor type, and happy to take questions in kind of more detail on that way. So I've got about 4 different types of technology, and I'll briefly explain them, but you're a very educated audience, so you might know a lot of this already. So we start with my favourite one, the pressurised water reactor. It's my favourite because that's what I watch keep on as well, so used to the kind of physics behind it. The key feature to these Generation 4 technologies is their safety levels, and they are not pressurized systems. They have passive safety features to protect them in there as well. So again, this operates exactly like your kettle. It produces steam, which goes into a turbine, which generates electricity, or you can take that steam off for heat in there as well. It's technology that we are all used to in the marine space, from icebreakers, submarines, aircraft carriers, land-based structures as well. But the safety systems in this are kind of one of the key bits they're keeping it at ambient pressure rather than pressurized as well. Because what we have, if you go to Plymouth and you live in Plymouth, you'll be issued iodine tablets for your thyroid. This is because we have something called an emergency planning zone. If you lose coolant to the reactor, you'll get a large bang, and that will spread nuclear material over a radius. And your emergency planning zone is to work out what that radius is and protection measures in that radius. So the technologies we're looking at now potentially will have smaller emergency planning zones. I won't say no emergency planning zones, but the goal is to keep the emergency planning zones very much into the ship's structure. So try and keep it as contained as possible. So ports don't have to have all that extra facilities to take them on. I mean, a quick anecdote we got was we were working with a port, and we were doing a joint development project on nuclear about how would you bring a nuclear ship into port. This port was like, ooh, it's very, very scary. Ooh, it was a very hard working group, trying to kind of do a little storyboard, working out the challenges, where you pick the ship up, the pilotage. We broke for lunch, we were having lunch, the port was talking about its ethanol bunkering terminal. And you're like, well, how do you do your ethanol bunkering terminal? Well, we've got a special jetty out there, we've got our own emergency planning, we've got a fire crews on there, you have to be trained. And you're like, well, nuclear stays in the box, you could do that for nuclear. And you're like, yeah, you could see that kind of moment in that way. But again, this was the perception that nuclear has some kind of magical properties that was different to something that could go into the air and you can breathe in. So ports do have the ability to take this as well, but it's their understanding and working with them to how it can be achieved. You may have seen this one on lots of kind of computer-generated images, the ones reactors that sit in kind of shipping containers, where you can swap in, swap out. The US Army are looking at this one as kind of forward-based into providing power, because they found in conflicts such as Afghanistan, a lot of the injuries happen was transporting fuel to these bases. But if you had your own power supply on the base, then you would reduce that kind of number of convoys to it. But then we have those kind of marine applications of where we're looking about 5 to 10 megawatts of power. A heat pipe reactor could be exactly what you're looking for to kind of put on your ship for kind of a bit of extra power. Or navies are looking at it as well. If they have extra sensors, they can put this power unit in there as well. And it kind of uses a kind of a vapor system to kind of evaporate and condense to provide cooling of the reactor in there as well. So again, a passive cooling system, which is the key thing. But again, a very, very low kind of megawattage, again, compared to Hinkley Point, which is in the gigawatts. So we can very see the difference in there as well. Next, my screen's gone blank that way, but that's okay. Next one, we've kind of got the molten salt one. This is one where we're talking about more than 10 megawatts, potentially up to 50. This is the kind of, not the holy grail is the wrong phrase, but it's the kind of one that a lot of people are looking for as the kind of main kind of front runner in this technology. So back in the 50s, when Admiral Rickover was in charge of the US Navy reactor program, they were looking at molten salt and pressurized water reactors, just because the advent of the Cold War and the potential for pressurized water reactors in submarines, that was the technology that was chosen, and molten salt was parked. But the fuel is dissolved into the molten chloride salts flowing around the core. You have the ability to top it up in there, top it up as you go. There's kind of putting salt crystals into your dishwasher as a kind of a crude analogy. And also, if it all goes wrong and there's an issue, you can drain it out and it solidifies in a tank at the bottom. I must admit, once you solidified in that tank at the bottom, you cannot restart it. So it is a very expensive process. But this is kind of one of the solutions we've got in there of those kind of safety systems for a kind of different types of reactor. And then I've got a kind of couple ones in there as well. We have kind of a high temperature gas reactor and kind of lead cooled reactors in there as well. The Soviets experimented with sodium cooled reactors in there as well for the high power density. But again, if you don't use it, the sodium solidifies as well. And also it's not very good in water. So there's those challenges. And then we have high powered temperature gas reactors, which are cooled by helium as well. So there's different technologies, but it's those different potential applications. So if you've got a large FPSO, you may want something like a molten salt high temperature gas reactor. If you've got a small ship or a small power barge, you may want a heat pipe reactor. So there's different types of reactor with different power outputs, and they are suitable to kind of various applications as well, with the ability to be moved, turned off, so they have those kind of benefits in there as well. So I've kind of explained why it's to the fore. I've done a history lesson. We've talked about the applications and what Gen 4 reactors look like. I'm now going to kind of move on and talk about the assurance challenges. This is the bit that gives me more grey hairs than I should have, I think, at my age. But we have the two bodies here. And I mentioned about SOLAS Chapter 8. That's the only bit they have for nuclear-powered ships. It's very Cold War. It came into force, as it says on the screen there. It's old. It hasn't been updated for new technology. The IMO is actively working on how this code needs to be updated and what needs to go into it as well. The IMO doesn't work quickly, so this will take several years to come into force. As mentioned on the bio from Gary there, that actually I worked in autonomy, we worked with the IMO, and to get the mass code for autonomous ships out, that's taken probably over 5 years, where they're still arguing over text and sentences as well. And my previous boss loses 2 weeks of his life every year trying to sit in the IMO to try and make progress. So don't expect changes to happen quickly. And then we have the IEA. The IEA's main goal is to stop the proliferation of nuclear material. So it's a very different mandate to the IMO. So it's how that nuclear material is controlled. They are both UN bodies, but they both have different views, but they have no reason to talk to each other. But now, because of climate change and potential applications, these bodies are talking to each other. And Lloyd's, part of our role is acting as that kind of conduit between talking to these bodies and saying how it could work in the marine environment. In the marine space, we work for the flag states as a recognised organisation, and that is where we act on behalf of that flag through a delegation process. And this is something that we're looking to do into the nuclear space with the IEA. But again, there's a lot more politics with the IEA. But you'll be pleased to know that the UK is at the forefront, which is good. They are actually looking about how they can kind of benefit from this potential space. So it is in UK law. The UK can flag a nuclear ship. I'm not sure how it would happen at this current point, but they have made this provision for that to be allowed. So we have been speaking with the UK government about how the UK can be a forerunner for this technology applications, especially when I'm sure you've seen those pictures about the small modular reactor competition in the UK, about these power stations supplying the UK's needs and how it could fit into the maritime space. Hopefully my animations work on the screen. So I wanted to kind of give you an example here of how it could work. I specialise in goal-based compliance, and in goal-based we love a triangle. We work from the top down, and these are the various layers we've got in that triangle. So we've got UK law, which takes it from kind of statutory convention, and then we have our regulators such as the ONR, which is the Office of Nuclear Regulation, and the MCA, the Maritime Coast Guard Agency. And then they pass the requirements down, which we have to follow. And then we have the kind of class rules that sit underneath that's designed to meet statutory conventions in that way. And then we have standards that can sit underneath to kind of support. So we don't have rules for nuclear ships yet, but it's very much, we've got the standards, we've got solutions. It's how do we kind of put it together in a recipe that works, and we can show to the regulators this nuclear ship, barge, power station is safe and meets their requirements. So this is a kind of example of the various bodies that we have to interact with as well. And then, I know I've talked about this, but hopefully this slide kind of summarises it a bit cleaner on that one as well. And the key difference between the marine and the nuclear space is what we call the 3 S's, and security and safeguards and safety, about the control of material and access to the site as well, which is very different in the marine world where we don't have those issues, but it's something the marine world has to bring in there as well. And to get a nuclear license, you have to show that you meet that 3 S's in there as well. So it's how we balance that out and what needs to be included. So classification societies need to understand this and make provision in the rules, or we have to allow it to be part of the safety case process in there as well. Economic feasibility. If ship owners and offshore companies didn't think they could make money off this would go nowhere. As simple as that. So the kind of operating model is different in there as well. That if you have to just lease a ship, is that viable to you? Or you could build a ship and lease and make the money that way. So there's different ways that you could model it. So you could own the ship and run it yourself. You could lease, you could be the reactor operators on the ship, or someone could lease the ship. There's different varieties, ways of doing it. We probably haven't worked out all the permutations of how you could do it, but it's a very different model to currently within the industry in there as well. Standards and controls we've talked about. I kind of won't go on to that bit in there as well, but again, it's how do we transfer material and what countries could we work with as well. And if we work with a country that is okay and that goes to a country that maybe not okay, how does that work? Who has the say-so? If I license my reactor in the UK and it sails to America and America doesn't like it, can they say no to that ship? So the safety regimes have to be aligned in there as well. So lots of kind of challenges, and this is something that we're doing as well by talking to regulators and saying, this is coming, what do you think? This is what we think. Is this what you think as well? What do you want us to do? And again, this kind of shows us the kind of strategies in there as well. And it is public perception. Once we start seeing a few of these projects working, test cases, I think that public's perception will probably change and we will move towards more of that space. But again, without public perception changing, it's a bit of a blocker in the nuclear space that way. This is where Lloyds are looking at the moment, is kind of frameworks. Rather than writing prescription on technology we don't know what it looks like or operates, I said that Lloyds rules started in 1760, lots of experience with ships, limited experience with nuclear ships, going to put it out there. So how do we assure something we haven't seen or have the experience of? Frameworks is one of the way of asking the right questions. What are class societies good at? They're good at material assurance, equipment, components. If we put this together, we can work with regulators, work as part of the safety case and build up confidence in the industry and help doing that join between the nuclear world and the marine world. And then we can start doing some first-of-the-kind projects to understand what it would look like and the kind of remoteness as well. Because one of the challenges we've got, say, if we take in the offshore space, I could build my vessel in Korea, but I want a flag of convenience, but I want to operate it somewhere else that's not the country that I own it or flag it or have built it. But can I turn my reactor on and make it critical in where I built it and sail it around? Or do I have to wait till I'm, say, in the Arctic or Antarctica to turn it on that way and go, oh, it's not worked, that's a very expensive trip backwards. So there's these challenges as well that you can't actually transit with a reactor that's critical at the moment if you're not a warship. And this is one of the challenges that the AUKUS program will have to work out as well. But again, being a military program, there's different ways around that as well. But I talk about military as well because we're looking at how do we work in the marine environment, and the UK's got a very good example. We have the ONR, and then we have the naval regulator out there as well. And unsurprisingly, the naval regulator has the same amount of regulations as the commercial regulator as well. Pretty much identical. What they have is about 5 or 6 extra regulations that you have to follow, such as kind of discharge, decommissioning, and kind of propulsion in there as well. But very, very kind of similar. But the point of this slide is to show that actually you can take something from the land-based, do some changes, and it can work in the marine space as well. And you can follow that kind of strict kind of structure. The UK operates in a goal-based system as well, which is nice. It fits in very nicely with that triangle I showed you before. So we can kind of build up solutions, answer those questions when we talk about site boundaries, the 3 S's, emergency planning, training. Training never goes away. Training is always a headache. There's never enough people, and in the maritime space, that's more prevalent than ever. So again, if you put nuclear into the mix, where do we get these people? Do you need, say, when I was under 5 class submarine, do you need 5 operators in the manoeuvring room? Or now, do you need less operators? Or do you just need the big red button? If something goes wrong, it puts itself into a safe state. So actually, you don't need training as a nuclear specialist. All these have got to be worked out in there as well. So we did a bit of brainstorming and lots of scribbling on whiteboards, and we made it pretty for this, well, not for this lecture, but for a slide to show our seniors of what it could look like and the challenges in there as well, and all the various things that Lloyd's has to interact with as well. And it's kind of summarised in that Venn diagram that Lloyd's is very much the world joiner between the nuclear and the marine world, and that's probably the role that class will have to play. But we'll have to interact with all these kind of various parts in there as well. That shipyards would have to get a license to build reactors. Where do you do maintenance on your ship, and any implications for the nuclear side, and any kind of deep refit, dry docking? Do you have to go to special nuclear yards? Where do you come in port calls, equipment and components? Do they have any kind of nuclear requirements that have to be included as well, or what can be placed around what? And also escape challenges as well. If there is a fire, can you go over the top of the reactor, around the reactor? These challenges in SOLAS about escape routes. So there's lots of different challenges we have to kind of understand in there as well. And also the security as well, that if you put a reactor on an oil rig in the middle of the North Sea, is it hard to get to? Is it safe enough that way? We talk about kind of Hinkley Point, it can survive a plane crash. Do we want ships to have that similar level of protection, or is that overkill based on the numbers, the kind of the cost-benefit analysis? So all these kind of have to be worked out and kind of agreed by the regulators in there as well. I believe there was an article in the UK newspaper where they talked about the cost of policing all these kind of nuclear reactors and kind of scaremongering in there as well. So again, this is all back to public perception of what is safe and what you're going to do in there as well. So now I've talked about the kind of theory, and I like to talk about real projects, real progress, to show you that it's not all kind of pie in the sky, Lloyd's kind of thinking what things would look like. It's actually showing you real action. And I'm pleased to say this is Lloyd's offices in London, and we had the Director General of the IEA in our office leading the Atlas Initiative. I won't try and say it out loud because it will damage the YouTube video, but you can see it on the screen there about the Atlas Initiative. And Lloyd's is taking a leading role in helping doing that world joining and actually saying, how can you get reactors into the marine world safely as well, especially in kind of mass production, small units as well. Also, the IMO are looking at it as well in their kind of working group with NEMO, which is a non-government body, but it's made of industry advising on what changes need to be made to SOLAS Chapter 8 and A491. And Lloyd's been part of that through a gap analysis view, working out what is current, what is not current, what are the potential challenges, and how we solve them. We haven't solved them yet, just no spoilers there, but we're identifying what needs to change and how we work through it as well. So, it's always good when someone does your publicity for you as well. This is from the Director General's X feed or social media of himself talking about there and the excitement around there as well. And the person next to him is our big boss, Nick Brown. So a very kind of big moment for us to say this is actually happening. He's actually been to office quite a few times now, so we probably should give him a pass, but we still have to make him sign in and do the safety induction. But that's where we are. But this is really exciting. So we're actually making progress. We talked about the challenge of world joining. World joining is actually happening now as well. I also mentioned about ports as well, and actually ports accepting nuclear ships. It's not the ships driving around or power barges. Ports are part of this ecosystem as well. So we've done some work with Core Power and Maersk and a port to, in simple terms, storyboard taking a ship from the sea and bringing it into a port, and what are that challenges of bringing that ship into a port. So the goal of the project was not to answer it and show you how to do it. It was to generate more questions that we didn't know at the start and actually go and work away on those problems, but actually doing the thinking behind those questions. So actually, you can do it, but actually, you have to bring it here, here, and here. You can't just turn off the reactor, turn on the diesels, and then bring it in. What are the challenges? What it interacts with? What's around it in there as well? What happens if something goes wrong? Can it drift around? Is these kind of challenges. It's the same as we have with commercial ships as well. I spoke at the forum in Hamburg last year, and I said about no bunkering. You could see the audience kind of scrabbling in there as well. And I went, oh, no bunkering. And I went, what about going for the Red Sea? And I said, I don't think nuclear ships will be going for the Red Sea at the moment unless they're painted grey. So again, it's very much power barges, fuel production, something like that, just to get society used to it, and then we can gradually progress in there as well. So we're not going to see ships kind of charging around. You're pleased to know I'm getting near the end. I've got one last slide I want to show you, and then I've got a summary slide, and then I'll try and answer questions where possible. This is real projects. So the Prime Minister of Fiji is very keen for nuclear power. So the Pacific Islands are very vulnerable to rising sea levels, and pumping diesel, transporting fuel between the islands is very costly. So having some kind of power generation system that can go to the islands that provide disaster relief or something breaks down is actually very important to them as well. So we've been working, and the Prime Minister of Fiji has been very keen and has actually mentioned that he wants nuclear power, and this has gone around the world and very viral in our marine space. We've also got in there Prodigy Energy in there as well. It's that one there. Sorry, I'll press the wrong button on that one. Prodigy Energy. This is the kind of offshore, connected to land, sitting on piles, transportable nuclear power plants. So you can make them in a marine environment, put them together, bring in the reactor on a barge or a truck. So we're looking at kind of micro reactors here, heat pipe, put them on. That gives you a power generation or heat to use what you want to do with it. And then afterwards, you take it away, disassemble it, and kind of move it in there as well. We were part of a study with Prodigy Energy and the Canadian government to how this could support kind of remote communities, mines, supporting Canada's vast kind of coastline and landmass in there as well. It was a very kind of busy week. As you know, Lloyd's has lots of kind of shows, events, conferences, but Prodigy are very important to us. So we said, no, we'll do a press release, but conscious where we are of Singapore Maritime Week, we don't want to go into the washing machine and we don't want you to like miss out. They said, no, we're happy. It went out. It went viral. Our CEO, Nick Brown, had calls from clients asking about Prodigy Energy. Prodigy Energy got loads of kind of hits, questions. We had ports asking about this as well. So the kind of power of a press release and showing what this world out can do in there as well. And then we have that scary thing, AI. It's not just ChatGPT. How can we actually use AI not to make weird pictures of ships? I've seen some truly horrific ones, by the way. It's just, please use AI properly. One of the things we're looking at is working with Microsoft to produce safety cases and check-in safety cases. These are mammoth documents, but if you could use AI just to check you've got the right things, what's missing, you can reduce license approval times. For smaller reactors, this could be key to allow them to operate as well, especially at the low power ones in there as well. So there's some kind of examples in there as well, and I mentioned about the Maersk one. Maersk is a very big one as well, just because we've all heard of Maersk. If you haven't heard of it, you've all seen that blue container ship. So very big shipping company that is talking about nuclear power. This wouldn't have happened a few years ago, but now we're kind of getting that in that kind of ecosystem of ships. So you'll be pleased to know this is my last slide in there as well, and where I've kind of summarised what we're talking in there as well. So again, it is crawl, walk, run. We're not seeing ships charge around, but it's about cost, timescales, readiness, societal acceptance, but the landscape has changed hugely when we kind of started this probably about in 2020, where we were looking at what Lloyd's rules would look like, what we'd have to do. And to keep my kids happy, I've got a QR code at the end, so that's my effectively like and subscribe, but that takes to our Fuel for Thought document. It's very high level, it's glossy, but it talks about some of these issues a bit more eloquently than I've put tonight. But I want to say thank you for everyone listening, and thank you for people online. I've hoped you enjoyed it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Coming through now? No, just check. Yeah. It's not coming through, is it? Okay, I'm looking at the thing. Thanks very much, Matt. Excellent talk. Thank you. Happy to take some questions from the floor. Sir.
Could you wait for the microphone, please?
I can shout.
No, it's for the online one. If you could also give your name, please, and your organisation.
Thanks for the talk. I have the question that what's the best propulsion system you think can be employed for nuclear prevention?
Oh, that is a very political question, so I'm going to be like a politician and maybe sidestep that one a little on that one. But it's not direct drive. It's kind of electric propulsion systems where once you create electricity, you can send it to what consumers you want in there as well. So electric motors would be the kind of application, but I don't think we'll be seeing that in this kind of present time. But again, nuclear power produces electricity, and it's up to yourselves how you use it.
Some of the challenges really well, and we all have challenges as engineers, don't we? I guess one of them that I see is the medium-term availability of fuel. Certainly in the sector I work in, we estimate 2060, 2080 on current usage, but obviously as nuclear resurges, things like SMR, lots more people wanting reactors. But a lot of our fuel cycles at the moment are sort of open fuel cycles. We don't recycle very much. I guess we can do that. That's an option going forward. But I'm just wondering whether that's part of your equation, that sort of medium long-term availability of uranium, essentially.
I mean, thank you. I did kind of hint at it in the presentation, and what I'm quite keen to do in this is, I'm a nuclear Samaritan. I'm very biased towards nuclear, but it's not presenting it as it's the solution that solves everything. And there are challenges with nuclear, and you're completely correct that the fuel availability as well, and the type of fuel in there as well, that low and rich fuel, and the politics of which countries can get that fuel as well, because there are political allegiances out there that we have to kind of abide with in there as well. So we don't know on that one as well, but we are chatting with the kind of regulators, and regulators, especially in the UK, are looking about their kind of fuel supply and how they kind of step up to be in there as well. Because the challenge is that for regulators, you want to be that regulator that's leading the way in the kind of maritime space. But all regulators have that challenge that they just don't have enough people. They've got all their land-based projects to look after. So when you say mass-produced ships, it's very, very scary. So I think it's a huge challenge, and I'm not sure where we kind of sit in that space. So I think it's slowly, to be honest, and that might be the kind of throttle that drives nuclear ships or power barges or offshore.
You've got to wait for your microphone.
It's for people on the YouTube stream.
Just like Britain's Got Talent. But he didn't know.
I've been in and out of Faslane a few times, and you look at the level of security that you've got at Faslane and Devonport as well.
Yeah.
Also for the transport of nuclear material. How will that be upheld in these situations?
I mean, that's a great question. So if we take Devonport, you obviously got your blue and orange lines. So you've got the licensed site and the authorised site. They're different as well. But again, on that picture I talked about, it's the enrichment of the fuel. So it's very, very kind of different on the military base in there as well. So again, that's about the safeguarding question, the security question, the kind of access to it, and the amounts of fuel being used as well. I can't say that, there's a limit that if you have a very small amount of fuel, bad actors will go, actually, it's too small, we're not interested. But if it's hard enough, too hard to get to that point of effort, then that may be the kind of factor that kind of controls it as well. But that's one of the things that has to be worked out in that kind of 3S scenario as well. Like, how do we do it for ships? How do we stop the ship's crew from tampering it? How do we do it in the building there as well? So, yeah, it's something that's got to be worked out in these projects kind of slowly. That's why we're probably thinking that something in one country's waters, one regulator kind of looking at it to kind of understand that kind of operating model.
I've got two sort of questions. One follows on from the security one. If we're talking about putting nuclear reactors, even small ones, in vessels, could a vessel not be hijacked and then taken somewhere and exploded to make a dirty bomb? And therefore, if that's the case, are we going to have armed guards on these vessels, considering the sort of dangerous world that we live in? And the other one is, you mentioned the public, which was very, very brief, and I would have thought getting the public on board is very important. Here in the northeast, they tried to build a nuclear power station at Durrett Bay. One woman headed up the campaign for 40 years till the land was eventually sold and very successfully stopped it being built. People down in Teesside protested against US Navy ships being dismantled there. I was surprised just how you skirted over getting the public on board, because most public don't like nuclear. And they're scared. They see the incident at Rock Hull, where two ships collided. They see the recent incident which made the news of the ship which plowed into somebody's garden. People's perception is ships aren't safe. The fact that there's thousands of ships doing journeys around the world is by the by. They see what's on the news. So I do wonder how you intend to sell this to the public and get them on board, because personally I don't think it's happened.
Again, it's probably a question I can't answer directly here, like a definitive answer. So I'll take your questions one by one, if that's okay. So the hijacking one, I mean, we generally don't know for that one. And that is up to for the regulators to think about and actually work out how the first one that moves, what will need to be around it in there as well. But we have ships, as you said, thousands of ships sailing around carrying volatile cargoes. I mean, we've all seen that terrible film Speed 2, where they hijacked the cruise ship and it took days to hit the port. It's a different kind of scenario in there that will have to be worked out in that kind of safety case for that ship to operate. Lloyd's role in this space is providing the kind of assurance and evidence. We wouldn't be doing the kind of threat work. That's outside of the class. That's a different organisation supporting the safety case of the kind of operator. But the public perception one, I mean, that is a kind of huge one, where the fact that we're seeing shipping companies say yes to it, especially Scandinavian ones such as Maersk, shows that public perception is shifting at that level. But the studies that, again, on the Fuel for Thought one in there, if you scan the QR code, has some kind of information there about kind of the younger generations being more open to nuclear and kind of more understanding about it as well. So it's something that needs to be taught at schools and kind of understanding there as well. When we talk about green energy in there as well, the government has classified nuclear as that green energy in there as well, is putting it part of the mix and kind of understanding it in there as well. I mean, hopefully in the talk I did kind of mention about the challenge of disposal in there as well, which is a kind of huge challenge. But no, it's starting from the next generation, which is going to be the kind of operator of the ship, of getting into that kind of school level, getting that kind of understanding, but getting used to seeing it now and there as well. I mean, I mentioned about the nuclear cruise ship. I don't think you'd get many people on a nuclear cruise ship. I think that would be too scary, but people have been talking about that, which is quite confusing as well. So it's interesting.
Keith Hutchinson from Safina. Thank you very much for coming along and doing such a great talk over what is a very broad subject, and as by the last question, also quite contentious. So thank you very much. I've been lucky enough in my career to work with some really bespoke projects. Some of them involving nuclear, both we can design things to try to feel safe. But at the end of the day, there has to be people on board to be able to do these things. So my question comes around the operation. The first one is refueling. You've talked about anything between 3 and 30 years. I imagine 30 years is a very highly enriched fuel, which wouldn't be available to the normal shipping. So I presume down a low-grade fuel, a couple of percent enrichment. What are the different avenues that are being looked at for refueling? Is it pulling them out? Is it actually doing the refueling? And how long would you say it taken? Because commercially, when a ship's not working, it's not making money. So refueling, happens during loading at the moment. Bunkering happens during loading. Obviously, it's now going to have to then be put into like a deep refit, 5-year refit for special. And the other one is people on board. I imagine, yes, you can do electric propulsion, but I imagine you're going to have to spin a steam turbine. Come to my talk from the start of the year, that was going to be powered by coal from steam. Still steam. So you've got to have your people on board that are able to operate a steam plant, as well as a reactor, potentially, unless it is a pure black box. Marine colleges are now not producing anybody with a steam ticket. I know the Navy's still on. It is the reserve of the Navy. There's a few, LNG carriers kicking around out there, maybe the odd VLCC, but nobody's producing. How do you see these people? Because these skills are being lost rapidly, I would have thought. So there's two questions of refueling and the crew.
So, again, from the Lloyd's view, as we talked about kind of frameworks and structure, we would look at a kind of a typical kind of regulator kind of view of their kind of license requirements, and how Lloyd's does it in goal basis. We have something called hooks, where we ask the question and then we look to the kind of designer to actually say how they would solve that question there as well. So this would bring the port designer, that kind of group question is thinking, actually, where would you refuel the ship and how would we refuel the ship? As you said, time is money in the commercial space there as well. We've looked at some kind of studies of where you look at those heat pipe reactors in the ISO container. Can you swap in and swap out? Well, actually, one of the challenges in there is if you're swapping out, there's decay heat. You have to leave it to get it down to an acceptable level to take it out, and you have to still leave it somewhere then as well. So different parts of yards or different yards will be doing different activities. But again, we're looking for the marine and the nuclear regulators to kind of work together and actually work out some kind of baseline requirements and almost working out a kind of trial on that one, on the kind of refueling one. The question on the skills, again, it's back to marine industry. We're not producing enough seafarers in there as well. Where do these people come from? They're not growing on trees. And again, it's about starting now and making a career in the marine industry kind of attractive. I was part of the UK Nest program where we're trying to get more young people into engineering, and all these great initiatives like how do you get people in to do something that you want, you're desperate for people. The obvious answer is money. So do we make them all rock star wages to encourage them in that way? But it's a challenge, and again, this is why we won't see lots of ships charging around. It's a limited factor on public perception, fuel supply, people, disposal. This might be the kind of throttle that kind of gauges us how we go in the future. But no, it's a definite kind of challenge. And from a Lloyd's perspective, we just have to kind of note that and say, training, how's that done? And that's a flag requirement that we would do in part of an audit process as well.
Just on that one there, Keith, the MCA is putting out for the next 10 years of training and steam is included in that.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, still so it's still a requirement. And they're putting a new syllabus out, although I'm not quite sure what's new about steam. I'll learn. Ian, sir.
Ian Buxton. Some years ago, I was on the MOD committee looking at the application of nuclear power in commercial vessels. The conclusion we came to was that it was best to have a land-based plant or a barge-based plant producing what we might call transportable fuels, which you then use in a relatively conventional powered ship. Is that still really the most likely way ahead?
Yes, and it's one of the examples I had up earlier, actually, and that's one of the ones that kind of helps that public perception argument of actually producing those other alternative fuels in a secure location. So we talked about Project Energy, that it's connected to a jetty, or it sits on a pile, or it could be floating, where it's further enough away, it's got that protection around it, but it's operating in that marine space, and that will probably help gain public kind of confidence. But one of the other things you talked about in the kind of putting it into commercial ships, we know due to conflicts around the world, such as kind of drones, and kind of one of the options is kind of offshore basing, where you have a ship that produces your power, where effectively it's like a giant phone charger. You plug in all your kind of kit, toys, drones, it charges up, it goes away, and you're not having to come back to kind of refuel in there as well. So it's fuel costs and where you get your fuel from is a big kind of factor in this kind of discussion, and especially the power for nuclear to be disruptive as well. The marine industry is still trying to work out where it goes, because there's not one horse that's winning in the kind of alternative fuel race as well. If it said that diesel had now become clean again, I think the marine industry might all go back to diesel, because we understand it and it's got its power density qualities. But it's a very interesting topic in there as well. But I think offshore, small, trial, proving it, data centers producing those fuels is the first initial steps in kind of small kind of quantities in there as well, just to reduce the kind of burden on those big land-based sites.
Matt, I think we have an online
Oh.
question.
We've got two questions, actually. So there's one from Zane AJ. How is nuclear waste handled for Maritime? You want clarification from me?
No. I was just trying to think how to answer that question on that one. And nuclear waste in Maritime is very much government owned by navies and has a kind of special government process. And then it's pretty much all we can kind of answer that one that way. But the bigger problem is what we're probably going to allude to is we're going to have more of these nuclear ships applications. Our nuclear waste stockpile will increase. So one of the things that's looking forward in the kind of future kind of gaze in it is technologies that can use spent fuel and how it's processed, reprocessed, and the amount of fuel is actually produced. Is it huge mountains of it, or is it quantities that can be manageable? And the question about nuclear kind of waste is that we have a solution at the moment for it. Solutions can be better, but it's not like we have to invent a solution for it. There is a solution, but again, it's public perception on where you put that waste as well. So it's whether grants are in there as well, or where do you put it. So, but again, that's slightly out of scope for the kind of Lloyd's kind of viewpoint on that one. So probably won't dive down that rabbit hole too much if that's okay.
And the second question is from an Ian Braidwood. Can we get an idea about the size and weight of the reactor for, say, a 24,000 TEU container ship, please?
Oh, I would probably put that back to the designer if that would be all right on that one. It depends how much power they want for that ship, whether it's for propulsion or whether it's just for auxiliary systems. So whether they want a few heat pipe reactors, or they want to pressurize water or molten salt. It's just depending on the use case and where that vessel is operating in there as well. So that's very much a designer question. From the Lloyd side, it's the integration of that into the vessel.
So I'll take one final question to close the thing off.
Any more questions on the floor?
No. Okay, I'll take that opportunity myself. You mentioned earlier. You mentioned earlier about obviously the OPEX coming down because of the low bunker costs, which will have upset that Hamburg audience. Yeah. How much more is CapEx?
Again, this is back to the model, whether you're actually paying for the ship to run it yourself, or you're building it for someone to, and then you're kind of selling it through its kind of 20-year life of the ship. So there are studies out there to kind of model it and kind of understand it in there as well, but again, it's those different financial models and the disruptive nature of kind of nuclear. You're not going to take a ship that's already been built and given to you. There's some costs involved in there as well, but the costs are greater than a conventional ship. But that's a very safe answer, isn't it? So.
Okay, then. Well, I can thank the audience for the questions. Thank obviously the speaker for coming here all the way from Bristol.
Yes.
So he's got the train up. That wasn't nuclear powered, was it? No.
Definitely
no,
not.
No, it was diesel. And the vote?
Well, there's a few things I would like to say, but first of all, I've done quite a few of these, lectures and such like. It's always been a good sign to me that the amount of questions you get at the end of the lecture dictates how good the lecture itself was. So I can say that there's still a lot more questions out there for yours, so you've been very, very successful on that count. I think everyone's very, very interested in the idea of nuclear on ships, and I'm possibly a little bit relieved saying that the idea may be to generate different fuels on shore to fuel the vessels that are using it so they don't have this nuclear capacity actually on board. I think that's a wonderful idea. The other thing that came to my mind was how much consideration has been given to the idea of losing fission reactors and moving on to fusion reactors. That would change things quite a lot, wouldn't it? It would change thought, and certainly wouldn't change your plans very much, I don't think, really. But anyway, it was very, very well explained. I think anyone who isn't familiar with nuclear now feels a lot more comfortable with the idea of using it on maritime purposes. And with that in mind, I'd like to thank you very, very much, and I'd like the audience to show their appreciation in the usual manner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just remind people who rushed into the lecture theatre before, because they thought they missed the talk, who haven't signed in. So the book is still available. Please sign in if you haven't already done so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Unfortunately, we had a bit of a technical problem with the mixer. The people who asked questions, could you please re-record them? The microphones weren't switched on properly. So could I ask the people
what a
who asked
shame.
questions
Could I just reach
them?
across?
Sorry.
Shall I come down a bit?
Sorry?
Shall I come down to the front?
Well, it's okay, yes. Well, I'll get this gentleman here.
Yes, there we go, Matthew, no problem.
What's the best?
Well, there we are. There's another evening over, another wonderful
What's the
lecture.
best propulsion system for
Can you please,
nuclear-driven ship?
as Gary said, make sure you have signed the books and the sheets at the entrance. And please also take heed of the upcoming lectures that we're having. Please attempt to come along and even more so become members of the North of England Institute of Mining and Mechanical Engineers. I look forward to seeing you all in the very near future. Thank you. Bye.
Are we going to have armed guards on vessels? What would happen if a vessel was taken over and people used it to create a dirty bomb? My second one is regards public perception, which you skirted over. I don't think the public would buy into it. How do you intend to sell it to the public? We've had a lot of people protesting against nuclear, and they continue to do so. Possibly they're misguided, maybe not. How are you going to sell it?
Just speaking. Yeah, so Richard Bernard, from engineering consultant from Heaton. My question was about the long-term, medium long-term availability of nuclear fuels. Current estimates suggest 2060, 2080, based on the current way that we use fuel. So just wondered if that was part of your arguments. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I can't remember what the wording was, to tell you the truth.
Just the gist of what it was.
Yeah, the level of security which is found around naval vessels and especially in naval ports, how will that be ensured or maintained on a civilian-based vessel?
Yeah. Ian Buxton. I was on an MOD committee some years ago when we were looking at the application of nuclear power to commercial vessels. And the conclusion we came to was that the best was to have a shore-based plant or a barge-based plant making transportable fuels, which would then be used in ships with relatively conventional propulsion systems. Is that still the case?
Lovely, thank you.
Yes, you want redrafted. Do you know which ones you want redrafted? 2 seconds. Do I just talk? Keith Hutchinson, Safina. Thank you, Matt, for a very interesting and well-presented lecture on a really, interesting subject. You've been very, broad in what you've looked at, but also went into some real specifics in the design. I was lucky enough in my life to work on some really novel ships, some of them nuclear powered, both as power vessels and as trading ships for some really interesting applications. However, one thing that you haven't really touched on is the refueling and the manning. So from point of view of refueling, I guess a lot of these reactors are using low enriched fuel, a couple of percent. So you talked about 3 years to 30 years. So I imagine the refueling is the 3 to 6 sort of year span, which could combine itself with a special survey for any propelled nuclear ship. But how long would that refueling take? And because obviously when a ship's not moving, it's not making money, and ship owners want to make money. The second one is the operation of these ships. You've talked about the final propulsion system possibly being a distributed electrical grid system, but I imagine the power in the first instance will be produced from a steam turbine, steam being produced by the reactor. Obviously, we have very few steam-powered ships now. It's becoming the protection of the military, really, with only a couple of LNG carriers and maybe the odd VLCC still going. So how do you see the industry reacting to being able to having to produce again steam engineers, as I think very few go through college now doing a steam ticket, and maybe a lot of colleges don't offer steam tickets anymore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could you do your little bit at the end? Thank you. You thanked him when you gave the talk before you handed over, because it was both the handheld mics that had a problem. My fault.
Are you ready?
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah.
Just carry on.
There we go. Right, I would just like to thank the speaker, not only for the information he's given tonight, but he is available if somebody wants to ask him a question. If you just contact either Mimi or I'm Arrest, and we'll pass over the speaker's details.